Hey there, Clariphiles and Clariphilettes. This video on July 4th is going to be about a villain.
Oh, no.
No, it's not about the NSA, and it's not about the IRS, though we could certainly talk about those things. It's about something for clarinet players that's much worse, much more insidious, much more damaging, much more frustrating day after day. What could that possibly be, you ask? Reed.
Oh, no!
Now, lots of clarinet players have problems with reed warpage, and they go absolutely insane, as I did many years ago, sanding the reed flat and sanding the reed flat until finally I ended up with, some pretty good toothpicks, but not very good reeds. So I'm going to say say a few things here you may consider it's kind of controversial. Of course, I never say things like that in these videos, so that what? I don't. But this is kind of controversial, but I'm saying it for your own good, because I think this will help you vanquish that villain of reed warpage. First, let's talk about exactly what really does cause reed warpage. Many people think that the villain in reed warpage is the reed, it's the cane itself, and they blame the cane for all kinds of problems. And you know something? Once you really find out the real causes of problems and you really solve those problems, then all of a sudden your cane gets a lot better. Your cane really improves. So I asked myself when I began to think about reed warpage, why so many people have trouble with it, and why I used to many years ago, but I don't have any trouble with it now. And I came to the conclusion, not that my cane got a lot better, but I actually hit on some of the real problems that do cause reed warpage. The first one that I think is a primary one is the problem of biting. Now, biting, as we've talked about before, is upward jaw pressure. Let me get a clarinet here so you can see biting has to do with bringing the jaw in there and really clamping down, crunching down on the reed. And you have to do that, or many people play that way, and it's not that they're bad people. Maybe some of them are bad people, but anyway, it's not necessarily that they're bad people. They may be bad people that bite, and good people that bite too. But anyway, the fact that they bite is not that they're bad people necessarily, but the fact that they're playing very badly balanced reeds. So biting is not a phenomenon in and of itself. It's really an effect. It's something that's forced as a technique by players because of other problems in their equipment. For instance, the other causes of reed warpage is, for instance, a crooked-facing mouthpiece. It's very hard to balance a reed well on a crooked-facing mouthpiece. Or you can have a very bad flat table, a flat table that's, say, convex instead of concave, or not flat at all, or completely screwed up, so to speak. So the other issue is one you would never suspect. That is the issue other than biting itself, and of course the related issue of having a badly made mouthpiece, badly finished mouthpiece, or just badly balanced reeds. There's one other thing that you wouldn't suspect, and I'm going to present it to you, and that's the controversial part of what I'm going to be giving you today, and that is the soaking of reeds, the complete soaking of reeds. Now, I know a lot of people recommend that, and they put their reeds in some kind of liquid, and they let the reed completely soak up all the way from bottom to top, and then they play it. And of course, a reed that's completely soaked is better than a reed that's not soaked at all. It'll always play better than a reed like that. But I think there's a serious problem with that, and I've eliminated that for years and years in my own clarinet playing, and I've never had trouble with reed warpage. And I think the reason I don't have trouble with reed warpage anymore is because I play extremely well balanced reeds. my mouthpiece is really very well made. It's very technically correct. It may not be the Holy Grail, but it's extremely correctly made so that the reed can actually function properly. And I don't soak my reeds thoroughly. Now, let me present this argument to you and see what you think of it. And I'm sure I'm going to get some strange responses for this. The reed itself is a kind of an anomalous piece of equipment. It's asked to do all kinds of things that within itself that are very, you might say, contradictory. It's that you ask it to be stable and to resist bending, and yet you ask it to bend. You ask it to play low and high, and then loud and soft. And also, the reed itself, in order to do all those things, it must be at once stable and yet very flexible. But it can't be stable and flexible in the same places, okay? The important thing is that the reed have a stable area of interface. Imagine a diving board that's not really fixed very well, right? And you go to jump on the diving board, you're not going to get very much spring because the diving board isn't well fastened in the back. It's loose, okay? Imagine that a reed that is warping on the flat side, that one part of it is dry, the other part of it's quite wet, and the other part's drying out on the sides and all that, and the reed begins to rock on the flat table. Well, that's going to cause a lot of leaks, and that's going to cause problems with the interface of the rest of the reed on the facing of the mouthpiece. So my idea is that the reed should be extremely stable there. Well, how do we get any piece of wood or any piece of natural material to be stable? The way we get it to be stable is to keep it in the most stable condition possible, and wetting it and letting it dry, and wetting it and letting it dry and wetting. That's a sure way to cause the reed to warp on the flat side and the flat table, and it's not going to sit well on the flat table of the mouthpiece. At the same time, the reed does have to be quite flexible up where it's vibrating on the curve of the mouthpiece. So the question is, how do you actually wet the reed so that the reed gets extremely well wetted in that flexible area where it does have to bend and flex and vibrate and all that stuff, and yet keep the area behind that sits on the flat table? How do you keep it in a stable position, so in a stable condition, so it's not wetting and drying, and then warping and warping and warping, okay? And the solution is ridiculously simple. Now he's up at the plate, and he takes the mouthpiece, and I don't believe it. He dunked it completely. It's a grand slam. Let's take a look at that in slow-mo video replay. There he's showing the mouthpiece, and look at that form. That's absolutely perfect. Fantastic. Fantastic. You can put it on the boards. Yes. And also, you could put the mouthpiece cap on it, and that'll keep the reed wet for quite a while. I don't have reed problems at all. I don't have reed warpage problems at all. And I never sand my reeds on the flat side. Now that may sound a little crazy. Look, you'll never get reeds completely flat on the flat side. The reed's not going to be flat on the flat side because you have one part that's flexible and bending all the time, along with this other part that should be as true as possible, so it'll sit truly on the facing. So the idea here is that even though you're not going to get the reed perfectly flat, you don't have to get it perfectly flat. You just have to get it stable so that you can finish the reed and balance the reed well, and the reed can play on the mouthpiece. The flexible part can interface properly with the curve of the mouthpiece, okay? That's really all you have to do. I remember Harold Wright saying that if a reed's going to warp, it's going to warp. And if the reed warped on him, he just threw it away. But one of the things he did was he would wet the reed, wet the flexible part of the reed, put the cap on it, and put it in a plastic bag. I don't think you have to do that, in playing. I think all you have to do is this simple little maneuver when you're going to play, and that is dip the mouthpiece in the water, shake it off, and put the cap back on. And the cap then will let the water get that flexible part nice and wet, while the flat table, the flat part of the reed is sitting on the flat table, is nice and protected. Now these things work for me, so I play balanced reeds. I don't bite. I have an extremely well made mouthpiece that's correctly made, technically correctly made, so I can balance reeds very well on it. And I don't soak my reeds thoroughly before I play them. I protect the stable part so it will be stable on the flat table, and I wet the flexible part so it will actually be flexible and vibrate well. And I've had a lot of success with that and no problems with reed warpage. So let me suggest, before you go blaming the cane or blaming the gods or whatever, then let me suggest that you check these 3 things out. Are you biting? Is your mouthpiece really well made? Are you balancing your reeds really well? And are you soaking those reeds so that to the point that the flat table never has a stable, is in a stable condition. It's always in a changing condition, because I think all 3 of those things can cause serious problems with reed warpage. And that's how I've avoided it, and maybe this can help you too.